Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to have such a nice crowd in Town Hall tonight, and a big welcome to all those watching at home. And today is September 11th, 2018. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And before we stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like to take a few moments to reflect on September 11th and what Patriots' Day is. It's a day in our nation's country where we found ourselves under attack, when first responders and ordinary men and women rose up as heroes in defense of our great nation and in service to our fellow man. And it was a time following that when we came together as a nation. May we remember what that unity felt like when our differences didn't matter and we were one nation under God. May we remember what that felt like and move that forward to where we are today. So with that, please join me and stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You know we're supposed to put that flag. It's not higher.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. May we have the roll call, please? It's nice to see you, Erin, tonight instead of in place of Regina. Welcome.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Acuna.
Here.
Councilmember Borelli. Noted as absent. Mayor Thomas.
Go here.
Councilmember Clarici.
Here.
And we're expecting Councilmember Borelli. She should be here in a minute. All right, announcements and presentations to the public. I had the privilege of attending the 9/11 ceremony at the Seventh-day Adventist School this morning, and it was a wonderful ceremony with the school children, a lot of our first responders who are our local heroes, and members of our police department were there, along with our sheriff's department, fire department, and it was just a really wonderful day coming together with the kids of our community. And speaking of celebrations, I understand, Commander Nida, that you attended the Memorial Stair Climb at the Red Hawk Casino and that you did the climb.
I did. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes.
Please share with us what that was like today.
It's an outstanding event. That this is the second year that the fire department has put this on. And this year, we all donated $25 registration fee for each participant, and that money went to Tuesday Morning's Children, which is children of the event for their charity. So it's kind of grown now, and just an outstanding event where we're walking shoulder to shoulder 110 flights, and it takes about an hour to do it.
That's you're amazing. We watched last year as you all did that climb, and that is no small task, and it's a very reverent, sacred ceremony. So thank you for taking part and representing the city on that. We appreciate that. Other announcements to the public. This is on September 15th, the American River cleanup is going to happen. And I know a lot of folks are concerned about the stream, the Hangtown Creek that runs through our city. And so volunteers are descending on our fair city. And if you're interested in taking part in that, meet at Kentucky Fried Chicken I'm sorry, Steve, you probably know more about this as far as the details. I know it goes from 8:30 to noon. Are they meeting at Kentucky Fried Chicken, or where are they meeting?
Right here at Town Hall.
Town Hall, excuse me. It's going from Kentucky Fried Chicken on through our city on up. Right? Excellent. And it is also found on the Just Serve website, justserve.org, I believe it is, and you can get details there and sign up. Are there any other details, Steve, that folks need to know about that?
They should just bring eye protection and gloves.
Okay.
And have a good time.
Right.
Sunscreen.
This cleanup does amazing things for our Hangtown Creek through our city. So really appreciate all the volunteers who are coming out to clean up our creek. On a sad note, former mayor and council member Robbie Colvin passed this week. So our thoughts to her family, and her memorial service is this Friday. She
Next Friday.
A week from Friday, pardon me. She served our city valiantly for years and was a very respected member of our community. I know you will talk about the Fringe Festival probably. That was an awesome event this weekend. Yes. when I'm done. And one more announcement. We do have a vacant council seat. When Councilmember Wilkins left, it's now up for grabs, and we are in the middle of a recruiting process to fill that council seat. And applications can be found on the city website. And I believe we will have the interview process on October 4th. I believe it is.
Yes, I believe
Yes.
so. That's
So if anyone's interested in joining the city council and putting their name in the hat to be appointed, please go on the city website for the nomination process. So those are all of the announcements I have. Vice Mayor Acuna? No. All right.
I will.
Councilmember Clarici.
Thank you. Yes, this last weekend, we had the second annual Fringe Festival, which is really exciting to have more than one. So following on last year's successes, this year was a slightly pared down one weekend rather than two, but it was a lot of fun. Myself and my lovely bride and the Thomases, we went out for dinner, and then we went over and saw one of the performances, and this was real special at Old City Hall in confidence on. It's something that I actually talked to Gavin about last year, and we just couldn't quite get it together to make that space available, because my feeling is that if people see that building not just as an empty hull, but something that actually things can happen in, not every day because it does have its issues, but periodically, like with the Fringe Festival and other things, I think it just will help galvanize and rally folks around what could become efforts to help restore the buildings over the next few years. So, but mostly it was just really fun to go in there and see it, and I actually got to say, and then the performance was great. We saw one from 7 to 8 or whatever, and then we went outside, and we said, you know what, this is a nice warm evening, and well, let's go have a beer. They said no. I was the only one who said they had a beer. The other ones were going iced tea, water, yeah, but beer. And so, and you know what? It was hard to find an empty space to get a beer on Main Street. The town was buzzing, and it was really cool. And then afterwards, I was able to tell somebody, you know what I did on Friday night or Saturday night? I took in a dinner and a show on Main Street, and that is really cool. So the performance was great, and the fact that we did it in Old City Hall was fantastic. And so hats off to Gavin and all the. Now it's the Fringe Compendium or the Fringe Consortium. It has some name. Apple Core Collective, sorry. And so we should be supporting that and all those kinds of efforts in our town. So it was just a lot of fun. And to go in, and myself and Dennis Thomas and Mike Drobich and Cleve Morris and Andrew Vandersmoot helped sort of get the space ready so that they could have the performance. So thank you to all 4 of them for helping out and making that a possibility. So anyway, that was great. That's good.
Yeah, it was great fun.
I do.
Yes, Vice Mayor Acuna.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for recognizing the importance of today's date and the various activities that were held throughout the county and city to commemorate September 11th. I do have a little bit of information, and one very important thing, and that would be the fact that we are going to have a candidates forum for the city council candidates, and that will be on September the 26th at 7 p.m. here at Town Hall, and it is thanks to the League of Women Voters. I know they are a group that comes out every election season, and they do a lot of good work to support fair and impartial presentation to all of our elected positions here in the county. I know I've, in the past, been a part of their candidates forum, and they do a very nice job of making sure that every candidate gets a chance to be heard, and more importantly, that the citizens get a chance to spend some time with those folks that are interested in being on this council. So again, that is here at Town Hall on September 26th at 7 p.m. And thanks to the League of Women Voters for doing that. I'd like to give a couple of shout outs to Steve Ewell and all of his park staff. And that can be wide from 1 to 10 folks, depending on what we're talking about. But here in the last couple of weeks, Steve and his various crews have just done a stellar job in addressing a whole bunch of locations in town that, quite frankly, looked really bad. The rains earlier this year were a real challenge for us, and the weeds that really needed to be cleaned up got cleaned up. Especially appreciate the fact that we've gotten that all done before Labor Day, so that all those folks that did come through town got to see us the way I like to think we like to be seen, and that is looking sharp. He's got some more spots in mind, and I know that he will get that taken care of. And the beauty of it is that all of the visitors through Apple Hill season now will also come into town and think, oh, what a nice little town this is. So, Steve, thank you to everyone that was involved, from yourself on down to Matt Lishman and all of your crew. The other thing I would like to also announce is the 2030 Club every year has a large tournament for serious softball players. And that took place. They always designate, and pardon me, I don't have the name of the young man. He's fighting cancer, but he is their ward this year that they're raising funds for his family, a young 5-year-old man. And they had their big swing tourney at Lions Park this past Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And once again, with some help from the 2030 Club and various folks with Steve's park department, we made some improvements to the park that I think aided in their efforts to have a successful fundraiser. We're going to meet with them hopefully next week to go through a review of how we did. Hundreds of folks at Lions Park, filled to capacity, and as I say, these are some serious softball players. So thank you again, and thanks to the 2030 Club for their annual participation and for selecting Placerville and one of our parks to hold that. So. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Closed session report. We didn't have a closed session tonight, so there's nothing to report. Adoption of the agenda. Any changes?
Move for adoption.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. No ceremonial matters. Public comment. This time is now yours. This time is for you to come up to the podium and anything you'd like to address the council on, as long as it's not on our agenda tonight, this time is yours. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Please observe the golden rule. Don't say anything you don't want said about yourself, and state your name for the record when you come up. And before I open up public comment, I'd like to acknowledge 2 written communications to the City Council. One was from Sue Rodman, who can't make it tonight, but she was good enough to express her thoughts on the agenda items this evening in writing, so we always appreciate Sue's input and everyone else's. And we got a lovely letter from Beth Feldman appreciating our pool, and we appreciate our pool supporters. It is a really vital community asset. So with that, this time is yours. Would anyone like to address the council? Come on down, Gavin. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Gavin Sellers. As mentioned earlier, I run a fringe festival, a really fun theater happening in town, and Apple Core Collective does events that promote local business. So throughout this year, I've been doing events to promote local business all year, and the Fringe Festival, and I was super excited about our use of Confidence Hall, which went amazingly, and it was really lovely to be in that space and to see people's reaction to that space and how people are really excited about the city being on board with arts, and I love that. I'm super down for that. And I'm super grateful for the city for letting me and Apple Core Collective use that space for what we wanted to do. The only snafu in our whole kind of event was a cancellation of a show. So we had a burlesque show that was going to happen, and this burlesque show is very classy. It's all about body positivity and loving yourself for whatever you stand for, whatever you are, whatever you want to express upon the stage. It's a very free form of expression. It occurred to me that the day of the event, so the event was September 7th, 8th, and 9th. The morning of the day of, I get an email saying that burlesque is canceled. The city doesn't want burlesque in the space, which is okay and understandable, but also raises a question of censorship of the arts, especially for such a lovely art form and such a something that's so many people were excited about. So many people were coming to our town to spend money for this show. I had more than 15 people walk up to me and say, "Oh, I'm so excited for burlesque," and then I had to say, "It's canceled." Like, I don't know what to do, and I also had to pay all the performers well, not all the performers, but I had to pay cancellation fees for the shows, and I found out the day of. So censorship is the suppression or prohibition of any parts of books, films, news, etc., being theater, that are considered obscene, politically unacceptable, or a threat to security. And I think the final one is the one that we're hitting on right now, is a threat to security. There was an incident at Heart Lounge where someone got punched during a burlesque show. That was an out-of-the-ordinary event that usually does not happen at a burlesque show, especially a burlesque show without alcohol involved. So on those grounds, that's where the burlesque show is canceled. I guess what I would like to ask the council, or to leave with the council with, is to say that if arts are going to continue to happen in this space and in this town, and if artists are putting their reputation out, my reputation was definitely damaged from this event. To cancel day of, it doesn't look good for me. If arts are going to continue to happen in this town, are we going to continue to censor them? And are we going to continue to cancel day of? Because that leaves the company, my company being very small and very new, in a wrench. So I leave with a question, which is, are we going to continue censoring content in our public forums? Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Would anyone else like to address the council? All right, I will close public comment at this point, and I would like to make a brief comment. And thank you so much, Gavin, for coming up. I know I've had a chance to talk with you today as well, and we had a nice conversation and a lot of different particulars from it. There were some tight time frames. There were some quick decisions that had to be made based on another incident in town. And it was just one of those really unfortunate situations. Moving forward, we have a further agenda item on our later on our agenda with a lease with the Arts Council. And solidifying that is going to help us move forward productively. We were kind of in no man's land right now without a lease to the Arts Council and the space, and it was just a pop-up venue that we made work, and some tight communications, and it was just one of those things. So I am confident that censorship will not be a problem, that this was not censorship. Sure, appreciate you're speaking out on this, and I have every confidence that we can move forward with a robust arts culture in Placerville, and we look forward to embracing that in a vibrant way. So with that, we will move on our agenda. On the consent calendar, all matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion unless any member of the council wishes to pull an item. Does any member of the public wish to comment on an item on the consent calendar? Seeing none, I will bring it back for action.
I would just like to comment, Madam Mayor, if I could.
All right.
And just thank the Finance Department for getting our Measure J fund financial reports are all up to date, and we have a running understanding of what's going on with that. I certainly appreciate the effort. I know it wasn't too long ago we were behind on those, so Dave, I appreciate all your hard work. And I'd also like to recognize Chief Ortega or Commander Nida, who's filling in this evening, for the successful traffic safety grant for $50,000 for specialized enforcement details for our police department. That is huge. Thank you very much to the chief and all the staff that were involved in making that successful, because I know those are time consuming. So with that, I would move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Thank you very much for that those notations, Vice Mayor Acuna. All right, may we have the roll call vote, please?
Vice Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
Thank you. No items pulled from the consent calendar. We are now on to ordinance, item 10.1. Tonight's action is to reintroduce an ordinance repealing Title 5, Chapters 25, Title 10, Chapter 10, Section 1 through 5 of the Placerville Municipal Code and Ordinance 1683, effective October 25th, and adopting Title 5, Chapter 28, relating to the business regulation of cannabis. Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is the proposed introduction of a cannabis business regulation ordinance. This has been through several reiterations with the council, and tonight we have prepared what we believe is a draft, but we are ready to ask you to introduce. However, as part of that, and this has been an ongoing process, we have a couple of things we want to bring to your attention. I've handed out a sheet, and there's copies of this in the back of the room, of some minor changes, and I want to emphasize that these are very minor, but I'd like to note what these are. The first one is in section 528080, and that's in relation to the council has the right to, by resolution, to set the number of cannabis businesses that will be allowed in the city. That will be coming to you at a later date. That's not before you tonight what that number will be. In the previous draft, in the draft that's on your agenda tonight, it simply states that the City Council in their discretion may determine the number of commercial cannabis permits, determine whether they should stay the same, decrease, or stay the same or be expanded, excuse me. We simply added the word decrease in there. You would have that option to increase, decrease, or leave those the same. So basically you review those on an annual basis and make that determination. Don't think it changes significantly the content of the ordinance. The other things, 5.28100, paragraph A2, that is simply, it didn't read well, and with the help of Tim Cromartie, we just corrected that verbiage to make it read well. And then in paragraph 4, changing the word and to or, violation of local or state law rather than and state law, so it has a little bit of a different meaning there. 528.180, there's just a code section correction to section 060 rather than 160. Section 528340, again a code section correction from a previous version of the ordinance. This did not get corrected, so that's just correcting. And the same thing with 528410. So with that, the other significant change that is in your draft ordinance tonight is what was requested at the last meeting, and that it was added in 2 sections. The first is in section, excuse me just one minute. It's the section related to personal use, cultivation for personal use. And it was added to section 390 and also section, apologize, I should have had that.
030, I think.
030, thank you. So it was added to those 2 sections, which basically says that cultivation for personal use shall be done in accordance with state law. That's the basics of it. There's some provisions in there. Odors are supposed to be contained within the residence. Repeated responses to the property from law enforcement and other things can affect what is going on there and can be found as a violation. But those are all in accordance with state law. So again, that was added. The other items, nothing else in here. There are some things that you see are marked up, but those are just what have been marked up in the past. That is really the only new item that was added since the last meeting. There is one more page that was handed out tonight, and I was going to leave that. I'll leave that to Councilmember Acuna. Met with me today and had a couple of items that he would like to request. And there's also copies of this document, I believe, on the back table. I think, is there? And they are relating to item 528180. And this is related to notice for when an applicant for a license for a permit. There's a noticing requirement in state law that requires 10-day notice of a public hearing to consider the permits. We simply added a provision to that requires a sign to be posted on the business or the property stating that it is being considered for a cannabis business license to inform the public right there on the property. And then the last item is section 528430 stated that for commercial cannabis businesses to provide name, telephone number, and email address of a community relations contact that can be contacted for problems if a neighbor or someone sees a problem, wants to contact the business, they will have that information available. Previously, it said that that information would be provided to businesses and residences located within 100 feet of the cannabis business. It was recommended, similar to what we have in our distances from sensitive businesses, that be changed to 250 feet. So that's a proposal by Vice Mayor Acuna that we discussed today, and he can speak to that more if he would like to. Other than that, the ordinances, as we have been discussing, as discussed at the last meeting with those changes, and so we are prepared to introduce the ordinance tonight, and if introduced, then we would bring it back at your next meeting for the second reading and adoption. So.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the language in here that gives us tools to protect our residential neighborhoods. So thank you for that inclusion. Vice Mayor Acuna, would you like to add anything?
No, I think the city manager did an excellent job. I appreciate him doing the work for me. The concept of having the notice actually posted on site came from a couple of places. One, we do that as a matter of course with zoning changes and projects that are going to be coming before the Planning Commission. Also, anytime an alcohol license changes hands, you'll always see the state sign that'll be in the window. It has very clearly states who's doing what, sale, transfer, etc. And it also provides heads up to the residents. In this instance, it'll be commercial operators around the properties to let them know. Just an extra small step to make sure that everybody around a proposed location is going to be aware of what's going on. The changing from 100 to 250 feet, again, is just to be consistent with some other language that's in the ordinance. Again, broadening out to make sure that on a larger commercial parcel, that at 100 feet you may not always have, you might not touch a neighbor, but at 150 feet or 250 feet, we're doing giving it a much better chance of making sure that that is going to happen. And again, the neighbors will know what's going on. Pretty simple. I had a couple of other questions, but I'd be happy to hold those until after public comment or Mr. Clarici's comments, or
it's up to you.
At your pleasure.
Why don't you would you like to finish your?
Finish it up? Okay, thank you. Two other things that I noted. And one is a question to the city attorney, and that was, in our ordinance, we're very specific about controlling what type of outdoor advertising that can go on, and is very, very limited. And it specifically speaks to one of our permit holders not being able to utilize billboards and banners, balloons, blimps. And I was wondering, there's not a whole lot of them left, but there's a few. Could we have any control over the use of a highway billboard?
If you're referring to the ones that are around town, they're all on state right-of-way.
Yes, sir. Those would be the ones.
And state property. The state, like the county, is basically immune from our zoning regulations. So we would have a very difficult time trying to enforce something like that unless the state said, yeah, well, we'll follow what you guys want us to do. I don't think it's enforceable is what I'm telling you.
Okay.
It's kind of what you expected.
Yeah, it's kind of what I thought. Would it make sense to leave ourselves an opener, if you will, there's other state regulations as determined or regarding billboard, so that if the state does?
You know, this whole thing, even though now it's been going on for a couple of years, is still relatively new, and we're working through a lot of processes with this, and I would think that that could be something that we might want to have dialogue with the appropriate state agency concerning, and we may actually get a better result that way than trying to push it through and start a war with the state, so to speak.
Unenforceable. Well, I appreciate that answer, Mr. Driscoll, and Madam Mayor, I just wanted to let the citizens know that we are thinking of these things, and these are things that I would not be in favor of. The last point that I had was just a clarification on the deliveries to a lab, and it was on page 43, 44, where it talks about a lab employee going out and picking up the samples. Did I miss it in another location? Because a lab is a pretty low impact operation, but a very necessary part of the cannabis industry. Would a permitted cannabis operator be allowed to have their employee deliver samples to the lab, or is it our intention that only, the way I'm reading it, only lab employees can go out and get these samples?
I got an email from Tim. Tim, do you want me to read that? Is that all right, or do you want to address it? Either way.
Good evening, Tim. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have no objection to you reading the email. I just want to clarify that the way it normally works, the dispensary employees or the retail employees are not involved in this at all. The procedure the state has set up is for the distributor to pick up the product from either the cultivation center, primarily cultivation operation, or the manufacturing operation before it gets to the retail location. So the distributor will then take it back to its place of business. The Business and Professions Code, there's a specific statute requiring the testing lab employees to go to the distributor's place of business, collect a sample with the distributor's supervision. The distributor is required by law to help arrange that. And then the testing lab employee takes the sample back to the testing lab. So the testing lab is the entity responsible for the transport of product to the lab to pick up and the transport back to the lab for the testing. And at that point, it's a done deal, because in the process of the testing, the product is very often destroyed. It's no longer marketable. It may be hazardous waste. It's going to be disposed of. And the only thing left at that point after the testing occurs is for the results of the testing to be transmitted back to the owner of the product, and that is probably going to be done electronically.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. And while you're at the lectern, let me take the opportunity to thank you for your expertise that you brought to this process. I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to work with you. And it proves that I had missed a piece of the operation. So,
right. Well,
I understand now, thanks to Tim, how this will work, and this lab that'll be a part of their process. Yeah. So I have no other questions.
All right.
Thank you,
so
Member.
much, Vice Mayor Cunha. Councilmember Clarici, any questions at this point?
Not now.
All right. At this point, I'd like to open this item up for public comment. The podium is yours. Good evening, Rod.
Good evening. Thank you, council members. Thank you for your work on this. Rod Miller, El Dorado County Growers Alliance, and the chairperson of the Yes on the MPQRS in Placerville Measure M measures. Thank you very much for developing this ordinance. I appreciate the staff work, and at this point, I think it really supports the community. There's illegal sales of cannabis that's going on in Placerville, and what this measure does is it gets the cannabis industry to pay for enforcement rather than the public. This is a very important measure as our county, I believe, becomes a central figure in cannabis business production. The city of Placerville will be a destination for supplying retail services. So please move forward with this measure. It protects your community in as many ways as we can possibly think. Probably in the future, we've got to think about reducing some of the requirements to make these businesses less costly. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Come on down. Good evening.
Very good evening to everyone. Ma'am, I'm just here to remind you my property that I mentioned last time. If it could be included, it just sits on the rim of that map that they have drawn up, 3081 Forney Road. Mm-hmm. I'm just here to remind you folks, if you include me in there.
We'll address that after public comment.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming here again. We appreciate you coming down tonight. Good evening, Kelly.
Evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, staff. As Rod stated, graciously, thank you all for all the due diligence and long hours we know that was put into such an ordinance. I thank you. I missed you guys at the last meeting. I think my representative Whitney was here when we were talking about the map, and I think you guys did a great job of finding a good balance in the map and opening up opportunities throughout the city for how small of a space we really do have to work with. The reading through today, I did my fine-tooth combing and just wanted to bring up a couple things, no major issues, but just seeing how it reads and if I understand it correctly. It is on, it's by page, by page 27, it would be item 7. Sorry, excuse me. Section 5.28.280, security measures. And in regard on number 7, as I'm reading it, all cannabis.
Kelly, can I just clarify for the count? That's on page 28.
Oh, thank
on
you.
our
Thank you.
pages. Just
Thank you,
page
Clay.
number different. But thank you.
No, great.
Secrets.
All cannabis and cannabis products shall be stored in a secured locked vault or equivalent. So as I'm reading that, that would mean that all retail stock that was on our showroom floor would need to be moved off the retail floor into a vault situation every night for safekeeping, or if it was intended that all backstock, by the insertion of one word after all backstock cannabis and cannabis products, meaning something that hasn't been brought to the retail floor space, being stored in a vault in secure type situation. So maybe tomorrow's inventory could be set out so when we open, we're utilizing the evening hours to be able to stock our showroom and be ready for the next day, rather than having to get in early and set up the showroom retail space every day. Just seeing if clarification on that. And then kind of on the same note, where is it? Retailer on, okay. It would be section 5.28.340. On mine, it's page 36, so it might be like a 37 or 38. Item F there, retailers may only, it's operating requirements for storefront retail facilities, and it's F underneath that. Retailers may only have the quantity of cannabis and cannabis products to meet the daily demand of readily available for sale on site at the retail sales area of the retailer. So just wanted clarification if that is intending that because as I'm reading it in a, not to be pessimistic, but as the trying to follow all the rules completely, I'm reading that as I can only have cannabis products to meet the daily demand of one day on site, and that makes a lot more safety issues in that we would have to have a warehouse or storage to keep moving product rather than it coming in the building, being secured in a vault and staying in that one vaulted area until it was. And through our inventory systems we currently use, we can move stuff as we move something from our vault area to the showroom floor, we can notate 13 items were moved from the vault to the showroom floor, and now those 13 items are going to be on the showroom floor until they're sold or voided for another reason. Clarification on that one. And then just above that is entrances to the retailer shall have locked items controlled a buzz-in electronic mechanical entry system. Earlier, and I don't have it highlighted, but there is a specific notation of needing the locks to not be electronic. You guys, somewhere in there it says that if there's a power outage, you want the security to not have the option of only, I'm assuming it's as a backup, you have a mechanical lock and a buzz in, so if the power's out, the security guard could essentially open a deadbolt and close a deadbolt, or if the power is on, the electronic buzz situation can be happening and they can be controlling that electronic buzz. I'm just not sure if the language, again, reading it, trying to do my most due diligence and make sure that I'm ready to do everything that we need to do. Those were the only things that I saw as that raised any eyebrow to me, and I thank you all so much for listening to me and all your hard work.
Thank you so much, Kelly. We will address those once public comment is done. Thanks so much. Appreciate those good questions. Anyone else? Good evening, Sue.
Good evening, Sue Taylor. I'm still concerned about what we're doing today, but first I ask that after I make a comment that I'm not mocked for making a comment at this time. I think I was, it felt like that happened last time, that because you've had all this opportunity to make comment, that why do it now? And I hope that's not a pattern that happens when people come to speak and they haven't done it the whole process, that they're not valid. So that's, and as you can see, you're still drafting this ordinance as even today. So to limit comment based on timing, I hope that's not an issue. So I do have a concern about conflict of interest. I think two of our council people, and I don't know if Patty's, wasn't here at the beginning, but I know two of our council people do have properties that will be designated as areas for cannabis sales, and so that's a concern. The thing that I'm also concerned is that in your document, or it's mentioned in this that no permittee may begin operations notwithstanding the issuance of a permit unless all of the state and local laws and regulations, including but not limited to the requirements of this chapter and of the permit, have been complied with. In your policy, you are allowing there to be, that they can do this within 250 feet of a sensitive area. If you look at state law, under SB 94, Chapter 27, Section 28, 26054, B, a premises licensed under this subdivision shall not be located within 600 feet radius. That's radius is half of a diameter of a school providing instruction in kindergarten or any grades 1 through 6, or 12, a daycare center or youth center that is in existence. So at the time of this license, so right there you are conflicting with state law. And federal law quotes that, I mean, basically this is illegal according to federal law, but to violate that within 1,000 feet of a school or other basically sensitive area covers double penalty to their fine, which is, it runs from $250,000 to $1 million and 5 to 40 years in prison. So I'm just concerned about, I think you decided to take that out because you couldn't make it work with how small our city is. And so I'm wondering how you're getting around the 600-foot radius requirement in the state law. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else?
Kirk Smith.
Good evening, Kirk.
Just to be clear, I have no position, made up my mind. I do appreciate, Mayor Thomas, the arguments that you've made. Likewise, Council Member Clarici makes great arguments, and I'm supportive of the idea of making more money. And in the name of full disclosure, our family has some properties on Main Street, which is verboten, and some down on Placerville Drive. So if anybody wants a dispensary, hey, just make me an offer. But my concerns have to do with it's too massive, the areas that you have to start out with. So you can anticipate there are going to be potential for problems that could be avoided if you narrow the area substantially. The area of Schnell School is just an area which you should stay way away from. We already found what happened when you had a homeless encampment, a wonderful project, but look what happened to the neighborhood that is still trying to recover from it. And so that's one of the concerns, is you need to have it a much more confined area to start with. If it proves successful and manageable, then you can enlarge it, but not to start with, because again, schools up in that area, and because of the blight that has been contributed to that area from past efforts. At the other end of town, I guess I wanted to mention that it was surprise to me. I have to admit, I should have read more carefully, but I kept hearing no Main Street, no Main Street. And then I see that what you're including, or could include, was that other end in the 100 block. I don't know why. It shouldn't be included. And there are a number of reasons. Whatever applies to the other part of Main Street certainly applies to that part. Why we don't have an historic district set up for it, on the city website, you have a directory of historic features that includes down at that end of town. The Elder Options building was historically the toll house for Forney Road. Forney Road was a toll road. You have the 1903 trestle. My grandfather built it, Smith. And so that's an historic area, even though it's been modified dramatically. So that's number one. We've already had a problem. I think Steve can tell us about how much money the city spent for cleaning up a homeless shelter that was made by the tenants, the occupants, down at that end of town. And I've talked to some people in that area, and they have some concerns because they see it all the time. So when someone said the skate shop, I immediately dawned on me that I go to a gas station there, and there's all kinds of persons who, and I don't like to use the word homeless because it's imprecise. There are some people who have a homeless problem because of drugs, and that's sometimes found in those who, whether it's alcohol, meth, whatever, that's present. So you're going to have that problem. And they've described some people who come in during some of the concerts where they've had for 2 or 3 days or camped out there. Lastly, up at the other end of town, there's a vape shop, and some of the businesses in that area have found problems. So it should be much more restrictive to start with if you're going to do it at all, so that you have a chance to try it out, see if it works successfully before you expand all over the place.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else? All right. At this point, I will close public comment and bring it back to the council and staff. I'd like to make a quick clarification. Appreciate everyone's thoughts on the map. However, the map is not on our item tonight. We're just dealing with the business regulations of the cannabis ordinance. The map, I believe, will be going to the Planning Commission. Do we have a date on that? Not yet. All right. So look for that, and please join the Planning Commission audience and weigh in on the map at that point, because that is not in the council's purview this evening. But appreciate everyone's comments on that. Let's see. I'd like to address a few comments made by Kelly as far as the stocking the shelves and the daily. Are we expecting retailers to restock their store every day and go out and buy new product?
I think if you look at the end of that sentence, it says in the retail area. So you can only have your daily quantities in the retail area, but your backroom storage, et cetera, you obviously would have more than just 1 day's supply. So that's the way I read that item F, I believe it was. Okay. So does that answer that, Kelly? Okay.
And as far as page 28, where the need to, do they need to move products into safekeeping each night? Is that the intent of this ordinance?
That is the way I read it, but I'm going to defer to Tim on that and see if he has a better explanation to that.
Great.
Yeah.
Sure,
yeah.
Appreciate you being here tonight, Tim, to help us.
Glad to. That is the intent of the ordinance, and the reason is, excuse me, the reason is that it is a best practice to have loose inventory moved to it that's in the retail area, moved to a secured area, a vault or what have you, because otherwise it's an invitation to theft. And we know law enforcement is very concerned about that. They like the idea of having product secured each night. Yes, it's a bit more of, it's a little more time intensive and labor intensive on the part of the business owner. You got to have your folks move your inventory out every day, but other businesses do that all the time. And it certainly is, I think the value added in terms of enhanced public safety is worth the onus and the extra of imposing that requirement on the businesses.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Appreciate it. All right. And the lock system, that was a good point as far as power outages.
Yeah, I think on the lock system, I think we're okay there. I think I lost it now, John. Where was that section? I did find the other section we were referring to. It is...
Oh, great.
It's number 14 on page 30. There it is. It says, shall have a capability to remain secure during a power outage and shall ensure that all access doors are not solely controlled by electronic access. Is that what you're referring to,
Yes.
Kelly? Yeah. So it has to make sure that if the power goes out, it doesn't open the building up for anybody to come in. So that was the purpose of that. So I think the two work well together.
Yeah, it's meant as a fail-safe so that in the event there's an after-hours emergency and first responders have to go there, it ties in with the requirement, which is in another part of the section. You'll see it in the application procedure documents when you get to that stage. You're not there yet. There's a requirement for a Knox box to be fixed to the exterior of the business somewhere so that in the event the community liaison is unavailable and there's an emergency, first responders are guaranteed some means of getting access into the business, into any part of it. Okay. And obviously that means you're going to be relying on low-tech solutions and not electronic, particularly in the event of a power outage.
Right. Great. All right. Well, thank you. That's important. And then last, I think it is important to clarify the conflict. Is there a conflict between the 250-foot radius and the 600-foot radius? Have we? Is there any answers on that from a legal standpoint?
The 600-foot radius is the state requirement. It's a default requirement. So if we didn't have a provision in our ordinance, that's what it would be. But jurisdictions are allowed to have a lesser buffer zone or lesser radius, if you will.
Okay, great.
So it's not really in conflict with state.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
I just want to mention in answer to Mr. Smith's two things. You already clarified that we're not considering the map at this time. The map was a recommendation of the committee, not the council. The committee to the Planning Commission to consider. So that's open for them to consider and bring a recommendation back to the council.
Yeah, we did not take action on that. We made our comments on that last time.
Correct.
Right.
The other point to that is, as far as the large area, the council will still adopt a resolution in the next few months regarding the number of cannabis businesses. So it's not like we have this large area and we're going to have every other storefront is going to be a cannabis business. I'm assuming, we have not had this discussion yet, but I'm assuming the council will restrict the number of businesses. And I don't know what that number is, but that discussion will come back too. So that will limit as far as how big the actual area would actually be. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for those important clarifications. Right. Vice Mayor Acuna or Councilmember Clarici, do you have any other further comments?
I don't have any comments at this time.
No? All right.
I have one. I appreciate the comments regarding Lower Main Street. I would agree. We've actually received a letter from one of the property owners down there suggesting that he would not want his business in that zone. My feeling is, and the only one that came to mind was the skate shop. I don't know why. It's just because it used to be a gas station or something. And Mr. Smith is correct. There's a number of historical properties down as you get down there. I'm not sure about the barbecue or the chiropractic office, but that is maybe part of the historic zone. I wouldn't have any problems. I know the Planning Commission will be taking this. I personally would not have any problems excluding that part of Main Street from the map. And as far as these two gentlemen, obviously if you want to be opt-in, as long as it's not in some part of town like some detached thing way up or way down out, but if it's contiguous with something that we're already considering, then I don't see why that would be a problem either. So anyway, my two comments.
Do I have a motion?
The action would be for one of the council members, if anyone so desires, to introduce the ordinance, and then that only takes one, and then if that person also desires, they can move that the reading of the ordinance, the first reading, be waived. That does take a vote.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
It's that famous introduce the ordinance and waive the first reading, and that would be my motion.
I see. Oh. Well, you've just stolen my thunder. I was going to.
I'm assuming.
With the changes as amended
the two sheets that
by
were
the staff
noted
this
tonight.
evening, that is correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the motion.
Now the motion needs a second.
I will.
On the waiving
I will
of the
second
reading.
the waiving of the reading of the first, whatever. Yeah. Okay.
So the vote's just whether or not you waive the reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all we're voting on, is waiving the reading.
All you're
We're introducing the ordinance.
We're only voting on waiving the reading.
And we're waiving the
Okay,
first
thank
reading.
you for that clarification. Okay.
2 weeks.
Okay, great. So we have a motion and a second, and we don't need a roll call vote on that. So all those in favor of not reading this whole thing to you right now?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
And just to clarify, because I appreciate all the comments, Kirk Smith was very correct in his various various business holdings throughout town. And the map is absolutely going to the Planning Commission because that's where that process starts. And everybody's comments should begin there. Pierre, do you think that meeting would occur in the month of October? So it will be in the month of October. I apologize that we can't pin it down any further than that, but look for it in the month of October. And that is another process that has to take place. And as the city manager noted, there is an entirely different set of meetings that will take place to determine the actual number of permits. So there's still some very important work that needs to be done. So I look forward to seeing you all again.
And that is if this ordinance were to pass.
If this ordinance were to pass. So.
Right. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you all for your comments. We appreciate it. All right. With that, we are on no public hearings. We're on item 12.1. And the action before us is to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate with City Attorney John Driscoll to update our city's personnel rules and regulations. Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As stated in the report, some of our personnel rules go back to 1982.
Excellent.
And so obviously there are some errors. A lot of those have been updated by policy or practice to make sure that we are following the law. However, it's our desire and recommendation that we do a complete update of those. And so we internally have done our own update with staff. However, we want to go get the legal review of those, and so we're recommending that we do a contract separate from our normal city attorney contract with Mr. Driscoll to do that review. If there's questions that he has, he will go outside to another firm that we use for personnel issues and can help answer those questions. But we have this contract with him for a not-to-exceed figure of $7,500. The city has a grant through PARSAC that we can use for personnel issues. We actually have, I believe it's $20,000 in grants from PARSAC that we can use for personnel issues. So it's our recommendation that we use that grant for this purpose, and I've gotten that approved with PARSAC. This is an eligible cost for that. So with that, I'll answer any questions, or the city attorney can answer questions about the contract.
So we're doing this in-house, and it's not costing any general fund dollars. What's not to like? Great dollars. All right, great. Any questions on this item? All right. Does any member of the public wish to weigh in on this item? All right, I'll close public comment. Thank you. And bring it back to the council.
I will move approval of the item.
Second.
All right. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
Great. Thank you, City Attorney Driscoll, for handling that for us. We appreciate it. Yes. All right. Item 12.2. The item before us is to adopt a resolution approving a lease agreement with the El Dorado Arts Council for 487 and 489 Main Street, and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement, as well as authorizing staff to prepare a request for proposals to review potential uses for those buildings. And what we're talking about is the Confidence Hall and Immigrant Jane, our beloved city buildings. So,
which one is which?
Cleve, is that you?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. For the past few months, staff has been discussing a potential lease with El Dorado Arts Council for the use of 487 and 489 Main Street. As you know, on August 14th, the council heard a presentation by Terry Lamonchek, who is in your audience tonight, regarding their plans to, or a proposal to create a cultural district and to work with the city regarding these buildings, to restore the buildings and to be able to use them for the arts. Tonight before you, what the staff is recommending is two things: that you approve a lease with the El Dorado Arts Council for 487 and 489 Main Street, and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement, and then also authorizing staff to prepare a request for proposals to review potential uses for 487 and 489 Main Street. That request for proposal would go out and allow anyone that has a potential use that they think would be good for the buildings to present that in a request for proposal format that we will send out, and then allow the city council or a committee that you may appoint to review those and come up with recommendations going forward. We think that this could perhaps supplement what the Arts Council is proposing, or it could be completely separate, but it could work very well in the process, give the public more opportunity to weigh in on this issue and look at opportunities for these historic buildings. The proposed lease for the El Dorado Arts Council, I know at one time that we were looking at potential long-term lease. What we were proposing at this time, while we further study that, is a short-term lease, and the provisions of that lease would be as follows. The rent would be $1,200 a month, and I need to note that that is approximately 64% of our current lease with Fidelity Title. The Arts Council would pay utilities. They would pay for parking the same as everyone else does. Any of the use of for exhibits or rental of the conference hall for exhibits, presentations, etc., the city would receive 50% of the proceeds or rental fees for that. The initial rent during the initial first 6 months of the rent of the use of the facility would be free in consideration for the studies and the other work that the Arts Council will be doing and is doing to attempt to restore those buildings. And I note that condition for the free rent does not apply to 487 Main Street or the conference hall that we talked about us receiving the 50% of proceeds. And then finally, it is a 2-year lease with an option for a 3rd year that we would look at the end of the 2 years and agree on whether or not it's necessary to enter into the final option year. With that, I can answer any questions, or Terry can answer any questions we may have. We think this is a good opportunity, again, to proceed in looking at ways to restore these buildings. I know when I first got here, almost 8 years ago now, this was one of the items on the list, is try to find a way to do something with these buildings. We've attempted a couple of times through some other avenues that have been unsuccessful. We think this is an opportunity that maybe we can consider and move forward with. Again, all we're doing at this point is agreeing to allow for the lease and then continue to study the proposal they gave us, as well as any other proposals that might come through the request for proposal process, and allow us to consider what is the best use of these buildings. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you so much. And I appreciate in staff reports that you broke it out so everyone can clearly see what we're dealing with here. Does my fellow council members have any further questions on this item?
None at this time.
No? All right. At this point, I'd like to open it up to you. Does any member of our public wish to comment on this item before us? Please come on down to the podium. Yeah, please come on down to the podium. Absolutely.
It's a new subject.
No, we're talking about the lease for the Arts Council at this point. Thank you. Ladies first. Hello, Sue.
Hi, Sue Taylor. So I'm concerned. I was happy that the Arts Council wants to go out and look for a grant to try to restore this building, but I'm surprised that you are now offering them a lease for a building that is not, I didn't think, occupiable. So I'm really confused about this process and why the rush, and I don't know about the occupant that's already there. And is this because they're going to be leaving? Would you really want to remove a current paying tenant while this discussion is going on with what you need to do to the building? It just seems kind of, it's like we're not doing things in order, and the building upstairs has not, as far as I know, been approved for occupancy. And so I thought, anyway, so I'd ask if you'd talk. I know the engineer, I actually got to go through with her on the building and looking at different things, and I'm wondering if you've asked her to, have you surveyed with her or ask her to do a survey of how much. I would worry about a big crowd being upstairs in that building without the safety issues being, or the engineering being looked at. You don't want to get a crowd of 40 people up there looking at pictures and all of a sudden everything collapse. And so I have concerns for what you're moving forward to do, because there's only, so many people understand structural stability and restoration. And I am also concerned about the historical integrity of that building. The presentation that was given by the Arts Council didn't really cover any historical preservation. And if they start taking out important elements that are historical to that building, you lose the integrity of it and actually the ability to use the historic building codes when you're trying to do preservation on it. So, and I don't know if they have the background to understand that. So I would think that the city would want to put some disclaimers or something in the contract that they say they can't dismantle historic elements out of there. Maybe there's a clause in their contract, because I've never been successful in getting the council to change their mind when they move forward with something. So at least maybe within the contract that you can protect the historic element. I just really doesn't seem like a good time to go ahead and lease it right now. But continue in working with them. So I guess those are my main concerns. I would worry about occupancy, and I'm really shocked because most people that tried to do this would not be allowed. They'd get red tags. So we'll see what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Kirk Smith. Well, I know when the steamroller is coming, so my comments will be just to make sure I get a few points that's clear. It's troublesome from the standpoint of appearance, because it's like a backroom deal. It's not a matter of just a matter of a few months. It's nearly 2 years of discussion. And then we found out about it. And when did we find out about it? The first time was when it was on the council agenda for a closed-door session to consider a lease. That's how, at least I learned. Then someone presumably gets the idea that, wow, we have a Blue Ribbon Committee, so we should at least go before it. It's not like a priest, you give him blessings and giving your approval. There was no thoughtful consideration of what the whole idea of that purpose was supposed to be. The Blue Ribbon Committee was supposed to address the issue of the tremendous economic losses for Main Street if that courthouse closes. And the way that would be done is that you'd have to look for something that would replace the foot traffic that's provided by the court now. You had a study done by economic analysts when the county had the same project about 12 years ago. It found that there was substantial loss that would occur. So that was the purpose of the Blue Ribbon Committee as it was described in a number of places, most importantly in the court pleadings. All the briefs from the respondents said, no problem about this blight issue that's provided in CEQA as something to be addressed, because we've got a Blue Ribbon Committee and it's going to address it. But none of the discussions tonight or in the previous occasion talked about how you're going to generate that kind of foot traffic. And if you had problems with parking for a courthouse, how are you going to have parking for this other kind of facility? That's not addressed. It was not addressed at the Blue Ribbon Committee meeting. It's a kind of afterthought that came, weeks later. So that's one of the concerns. They never considered the idea of a judicial center at that location, which would be done the way it's been done.
Kirk, the Kirk courthouse is not on this agenda item. It's just confidence in Immigrant Jane.
That in many ways it is, because this body has worked very hard to push that project at the other end of the Stroud. You, for example, Mayor Thomas, know how the city brought in someone on behalf of the city at a downtown meeting of the Business Association to say decision had already been made, when in fact it turned out it wasn't made until a long time later. We were here in this room, many of us, when you decided to push that project and say, we had to take it or the state was going to move it to Rancho
Court, this
Cordova.
is not about the courthouse. This is about...
You're helping to ensure that it will never be on Main Street. That's the reason it's relevant. And by the way, when I was here before, I remember talking about the $10,000 and told, oh, well, it's not about that. It's about the matter of special elections. And it turned out that when I was finally off, what was brought up to $10,000 cost for it. So it really is relevant. When you do this, you're helping to ensure that you can't do the other. And it's possible for more than peaceful coexistence. In the District of Columbia, the Court of Appeals building constructed before the start of the Civil War is still being used. And in the basement, they have a museum. That was, after all, the place where Francis Scott Key had trials and all those kind of things. You could have it there, but you didn't consider it. And that's why it's of great concern. Again, its appearance about a backroom deal that's troublesome. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, I'd like to close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council. I would like to address something, and Sue, I also would worry with a large crowd upstairs, and you will be very happy to know that the building is being leased as is and no occupancy upstairs whatsoever. It is to lease the downstairs of Immigrant Jane with occasional use, with temporary use for pop-up installations on the Confidence side. Did I articulate that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
no occupancy upstairs whatsoever. So at this time, so.
Question for staff.
Yes, please, Vice Mayor Cunha.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I joke about Cleve not letting me give tours of the building, but the attics are really cool of that old building because there's a couple of them, and you just keep going. Last year, I helped out do the Christmas window, and we added some light and cheer to the old building instead of having a dark hole down there. And I think it was everybody would agree that was a big improvement. And I went upstairs to put the lights up, and I was amazed at the condition of the original window moldings on the second floor, those cool arched windows that everybody would love to have a room that had windows like that. They have never been touched. Well, I wasn't about to be the first one to put a nail in it to hang some stupid Christmas lights, so I figured out a different way. So there are a lot of historical, there is a lot of historical element in that building, and I would just ask, is there anything in this agreement that protects it in the same way that I just looked at it last December and not put nails unnecessarily in pristine molding? Would it be unreasonable to have that in there? Because there are parts of it. There are parts of it that are dog rough, but there are other amazing parts of it that are have been really they've been what's the word I want? They've been cherished. They've been protected all these years. I've got them shuffling papers down here. But that was my honest take on it from last year. I'm not going to be the one to put a nail in, up here.
Well, we appreciate that.
So, and also just to reiterate the occupancy upstairs, unfortunately the buildings are nowhere near ready for that. And I think the tailors would be the people that would be the blueprint for the type of restoration that that's going to take. I mean, there's cracks in those old walls upstairs you can put your hand in. And so this, I think, is an opportunity, however, to take the baby steps and continue to protect the building while the Art Council does some pursuing of the bigger and better uses. I'll stop with that and see if we can get an answer.
It is not specific.
I'm talking about all the architectural
The architectural, yeah. There are provisions under Article 11 of the agreement that state that any installation, additions, improvements, or et cetera, must be approved by the leaseor or by the city. If you would like us to strengthen that language regarding protection of historic parts of the building, we could add some language there at your direction and do that as part of the agreement tonight. So We don't have to have the exact language. I think the city, if you would like, you can direct the city attorney and I to come up with that language and add it to that prior to execution of the agreement.
If you're more comfortable with some language in there speaking to the historical features of the building and that they should not be altered or in any way changed without the consent of the city, we can add that kind of.
Council could provide direction tonight on that.
Yes.
Please.
All right, great.
So directed.
All right, so directed, excellent.
Thank you.
Any other comments,
I
Councilmember
did,
Clarici?
yes, I do. I had a reason to correspond with a property owner on Main Street who has a lot of knowledge of leases and rents and some of the old buildings here in town. And he brought up some interesting points, and I actually mentioned them to the city manager this morning after I had this email thread to go to the city manager. One of them, we do recognize, Immigrant Jane is apparently an okay structurally sound building. You don't want to dig too deep into any of these old places. You might not like what you see, but that's the one we rent. We've had occupancy in there now for several years. Not the second floor, because I agree with Councilmember Acuna, especially some of the leaks in the roof have really done some serious, not damage, but they've kind of really sort of rendered that space somewhat less tidy. And it would almost certainly need some significant work if you wanted to put somebody upstairs of mustard. Ketchup, on the other hand, Confidence, on the other hand, there's no way you'd put anybody up there for any reason. We go up there. I had to go up there to check the electricity when we were doing some of our work downstairs for the Fringe Festival. And you don't feel threatened. It's not like the floor is going to fall down tomorrow, although it probably will now that I just said that. But it is, it has its moments, and you kind of realize that. So the idea that no one's going to go up there and do anything is in there. But that having been said, he did suggest that maybe we require some additional liability insurance from the tenant. And I don't know. I asked that you check into that, and I don't know if you had an opportunity to do that or not.
I have not yet,
Okay.
but I can, if you would like me to get that recommendation from our
Yes.
insurance provider
Yes.
For our property insurance, I can do that. And,
Okay.
and again, if with your direction, I will make that change if necessary, and after negotiating that with our with the Arts Council.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's I don't think anything bad's going to happen in there, but I think we're going to have a lot of events like we did on the weekend that are very pleasant and very nice, and it's a nice space. So that was it. There was some questions. He had some questions about some of the revenue. I noticed on here that, 50% of the proceeds coming from exhibit rentals. But I'm curious, though, because one of the ways I'm assuming that EDAC raises money for their operations is through exhibit things. So this would just be a way of extracting some money to make up for the rental side, because we are doing we are giving them a break on the rent, because that was brought up too, and I'll get into why that was brought up here momentarily. But I see now that there's an estimate for that amount of money, so it sort of brings the rent back to where it had been previously, within a...
Probably not quite.
Oh, no.
And it depends on what they're able to do, too.
Exactly. So, okay, then I'm glad that was in here. There was another question, and this one I did a little commercial real estate a million years ago when I did real estate, so I don't even claim to be anywhere near an expert. One of the other things, too, was would we be having a negative impact on rents on Main Street by renting at what could presumably be considered below market? I suggested to this person that if they find out that we are, in fact, altering rentals, that they should bring that information to us. My guess is that an appraiser would look at the building, look at the tenant, understand the ownership, understand the tenant's purpose, and say, oh, it's an outlier. And I did enough appraisals to kind of understand if you have outliers, you go, oh, they're outliers. They're not the standard. And since we control a very small percentage of the square footage available for rent or lease on Main Street, I think I have a feeling, I don't have as much of a problem with the idea that we would impact rents. I have a problem with that. I don't see that happening necessarily. But those were some of the things that were brought up, and I told this individual I would mention them. And they're good things. There are no backroom deals, okay? Let's just get that out there. There are no backroom deals. They don't smack of it. They're not that. It's not. The lease from the current tenant was coming up. Yes, it is true. The Arts Council has been talking to us. We are landlords. We're a different kind of landlord because we do all our decision making here. We determined we would rather lease to this person than the other person. This is a fairly simple thing. Landlords do it all the time. I own other rental properties. I do it all the time. I have a tenant. I'd rather rent to someone else. I let that lease go. I rent to the next person. I can do that all day long. It's not back room. It's a statement of fact. So these decisions have been made here in this venue. The Arts Council has made some tremendous presentations. Overall, I'm really pleased with this action. I think that it will bring a vitality to that building. Anybody that was around for the Fringe Festival saw that vitality, saw that happening. What Gavin has done on one weekend is worth its weight in gold. The fact of the matter is those are people coming to our town and enjoying some theater downtown, and then it'll be art exhibits downtown, and then going out and enjoying the rest of our town in the evening. The restaurants were full. Everything was great. So I am more than pleased with this. I'm fine with the process, and I'm pleased with the activity.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Clarici. And I'd like to kind of piggyback on your comments of the individual that was perhaps concerned about the reduced lease rate. And I think it's really important for folks to understand that on the first page of this item that the reduced rent is also in consideration for the $200,000 plus of studies that the Arts Council has done on behalf of these buildings in looking at this process forward. This is not just a 2-year lease, and it's so important to understand that this is as John stated, it was exciting to see life in these buildings, and it's hard to bring life to these buildings. There's a lot of need. The community wants to be engaged in this, and this is the beginning steps of a public-private partnership where we engage in a vibrant engagement process and explore the potential of these beloved buildings, and this is the first step. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and this is day one, and I'm really excited to see what unfolds because there's certainly great potential. And so with that, I'd like to
Mayor,
yes.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Before
I'm sorry.
there's a couple other things I need to bring up.
Absolutely.
I
I'm sorry. I
apologize.
got all
no, that's
excited.
right. No, you're good. So first thing I want to mention is I've been in discussions with Fidelity Title, who is currently in the buildings. They have been noticed just verbally over a month ago. I talked to them about the potential for this, so they could prepare and be prepared for that. I did get a notice from them today. They are close to finding a new location. However, they did note that it may take them a little, maybe as long as till November 1st. I've been in discussion with Terry Lamonchek regarding that. What I'm requesting tonight is that you allow me to work with her and work with Fidelity Title rather than have the hard date that is in here, authorize the city manager to adjust that date that is in there as far as the October 15th date if necessary, and if we can make it work for all parties. And I think Terry's willing to work with us what we can within her needs also, and so hopefully we can come to a good conclusion on that also. The last item is I guess it's an email, as I'm looking at it, this city clerk gave to me. This was sent to me at 5:42 today. I had already left the office, so I did not get it until right before the meeting. This is from the Nisenan Miwok tribe. Their contention in here is that as an indigenous Native American tribe of El Dorado County, that we have priority for right of first refusal for those buildings. Their recommendation is that we would like you to deny the approval and with the El Dorado Arts Council and instead put out an RFP so that other entities can bid on the project, is the language that they've used. In talking with the city attorney, we think that we can move forward with this. We are going to go through an RFP process, which would allow for that consideration if they have a proposal that may work. So anything else to add on that, John? Is that, okay.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Question for Cleve.
Yes.
When do you anticipate getting the RFP out?
I hope to get it out in October. We need about a month to put the finals of that together. And one thing I don't think I mentioned in our report is we have been in discussions with the county also, and the potential to include the old post office building, which now known as the DA buildings, and the annex, possibly including those in that RFP. But that'll be up to the county if they want to include that in part of the process and work with us on that. So we'll let you know.
I appreciate that we've opened up dialogue with the county on that. That's great. Wonderful. Well, with that, I'd like to move that we adopt the resolution as recommended by staff with the direction given by council, and that we also authorize the city manager to work with the two parties involved to find an agreeable date for the beginning of the lease.
Second. I'll give it to Mr. Clarici.
All right. I have a motion and a second, and roll call, please.
If I could make one comment,
Sure.
I would just like to, and I appreciate the concerns of the community regarding the courthouse project, and those are going to continue to go on, unfortunately, because that is a state project. Yes. Despite the robust state budget, they have a huge funding shortage in judicial. And those are all Sacramento issues. Those are not Main Street, Placerville issues as far as us having any control over that. I have never envisioned myself having any control over what was going to happen with the county's courthouse that is now run by the state of California. And I think we can all appreciate that chain of bureaucracy that I just described. There really are no backroom deals on this. It'll be a controversial project till the day, if it ever happens. My bet right now would be at least 5 and maybe 10 years. That's a long time from now. What the Art Council can get done, and I would not have been in support of this, but I think a 2-year lease with a couple of options is absolutely appropriate. It keeps everybody on target. It keeps everybody working towards current, really viable options and no pie-in-the-sky 25 or 30 or 50-year plans. I think this is going to put, just as the Apple Core Fringe, which it took me a year to remember Apple Core Fringe, and Gavin left. But anyway, that's just an example of what is now going to occur down there. And those were local folks that came to that. We didn't draw people from Sacramento or the Bay Area for that. We didn't increase our traffic. We brought arts to our own local community members. I will always respect anybody's opinion, but please understand that no one up here has any control over the state courthouse project. The county buildings, again, those are the county buildings. I hope to goodness that they do the right thing because they're really neat architecture. Mr. Ewell was the one that got most of the tree brush cut away from the beautiful architecture on the DA's building when we did the Vietnam Monument a year or so ago. It was totally covered in 40 feet of bushes. So, we're doing what we can with what we own. So, I'll always listen, but please realize that there are only certain things that we can do here. I look forward to seeing what the Art Council comes up with.
We all do, absolutely. So with that, we have a motion and a second on the table. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, motion passes. All right, those are all of our action items for the evening. Now we're on council reports from other agency matters and Transit Authority. Vice Mayor Acuna.
What?
Do you want to take that in transportation? Because John and I weren't there.
Patty's gone, huh?
Yeah, you're up.
Let's see. What did we do at, both of those.
Throw in LAFCO while you're at it.
Let's see. LAFCO hasn't. LAFCO, I reported on LAFCO last time. You will want to be coming to LAFCO when we discuss the fire districts.
Yeah.
And that is coming up later on this month. The transit, we talked about the Apple Hill Shuttle. Mm-hmm. And I think that was probably about it. Just the Apple Hill Shuttle and how that's going to work. And the same thing, Transportation Commission went over that briefly. It was also time for the project review for all of the Transportation Commission projects. I don't know if they do that quarterly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Quarterly.
Very comprehensive report. I am the proud possessor of their most current report right now, and it has all the information for everything that's going on and around Placerville, both county projects and Caltrans projects. We also talked about the Apple Hill Shuttle, how that might work, and the fact that this is a trial, and it starts next month. So we'll find out what happens. And I also was sure to thank those Caltrans representatives that were in attendance for their cooperation to delaying their project at Mosquito Road, which was going to reduce Highway 50 to one lane in each direction for 12 days and 12 nights. That project is still on the plate and needs to be completed, and we're talking about spring, but we'll come at it with a completely different approach as far as public outreach. Literally dozens of organizations, both public and private, that are going to have to be notified and be involved in that. So that is a process that Woody, the executive director, has already started reaching out to Caltrans. So that would be my report.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Clarici.
I went to a SACOG meeting, not the general board meeting, but for their it was one of those other land use, their land use committee. They had a very nice panel regarding wildland fire, the status of remediation for the dead and dying trees in our region, in fact, all over Northern California. Some of the alternatives that were going on. This is a subject I am quite passionate about. I actually have a degree in forestry. I actually worked on the El Dorado National Forest for several seasons before going off and doing other things with my life. The dead and dying tree problem in this region is substantial. It is a huge growing fire threat. Plus, it's also the evidence of a really sick forest, not just the bugs that came in after the drought, but the culmination of interesting choices made by the federal government and their stewardship of the forest lands, which they own. Most of the forested land in the state is under federal ownership. And so it's quite interesting. There's some good things. There's some good programs for locals who have largest pieces of property, but not huge. It's like 5 to 20 acres, 40-acre parcels where they might need help. There's actually now grant and loan programs to help them get that biomass off of their properties. Not much for cities and counties still. It's still kind of the hazardous tree removal program kind of stuff. And then other efforts, they are talking about doing a biomass conversion project up in Camino at the site of the old Mishcal lumber. Interesting. One of the things that's a challenge, and not to get too far inside baseball when it comes to trees, the amount of volume of the problem is enormous. It is. We have $1 million problem and a $1 solution, and actually those numbers could all be much larger, but. To give you just an idea, the problem and the amount of volume of material that needs to come out of the forest and off of woodlands in general is very large. I won't get into climate change, but it seems like things are getting worse in terms of fire danger. So anyway, it's a very interesting thing. Some interesting stuff, not as much as I'd like to see. I think that there needs to be a much more robust effort on the federal level to remove the dead and dying stuff out of the forest, but that may still happen. Who knows? But it was very good, and I was glad that they invited me. I'm not on this committee, and that's the reason why I missed the Transportation Committee meeting, was to go down and attend this, and it was well worth it. So that's my announcement for that.
Great. Thank you so much. And we did have a 2x2 meeting this month, and two major issues we talked about was the RFP process that City Manager Morris talked about coordinating with the county, and we spent a lot of time discussing the challenge with homelessness, which is an ongoing topic in our community. So, do you have anything else to add?
There's this one gentleman out here who I think came for like open mic and might have missed it.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right. With that,
we can talk to you after the meeting if you have something you'd like to chat with us about.
If you do have something, you missed it, open comment. If you'd like to come up, I will reopen public comment on that. And since you've sat through our whole meeting, so come on up to the podium and please come on down and state your name for the record. And thanks for waiting.
Marine Drive.
Okay.
Oh. And my name is Rene Boldick. I've been here for 35 years, but in El Dorado County since '67, off and on. Anyhow, the issue is compare the traffic situation on my street, what it was when I first moved here in 1984. It is pretty bad, and it's increased 4 or 5 times over. There are no sidewalks on Marine Drive. there are blind curves and pretty steep grade going down. And I have to get out of my driveway, and it scares me to have to back up because I envision myself splattered all over the road. There are people that are in the neighborhood that do not abide by any type of speed limit. So, my question, I'm familiar with Sacramento. They have speed bumps, and I will pay for it myself, okay, if I'm allowed to have it. As a matter of fact, I have an easement across Marine Drive, and it's deeded. It's my sewer line, and I'd be more than happy to put a speed bump over my sewer line, and I will bear the cost.
Okay.
And that's what I have to say. Right. You can't stop the speeders. I've tried many, 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 many times, and it's getting worse. Now we carry dead deer off the road. I've got a picture of a sign along the side of the road, traffic slow, children walking to school, and underneath the sign is a dead doe. Okay, that's where we're at. Somebody's going to be seriously hurt. We've had one fatality on Marine Drive already, some times back. But anyhow, a speed bump. And I would think that the city wouldn't have any issue. They have them all over Sacramento, and that's the state capital.
Can you give your contact information to Erin, who's filling in for our city clerk today? And I will, if you wanted, you can just go over there and give it to her. And I will give you, start a dialogue with you and contact you, and
okay.
We can chat about that.
Just something on the side, you were talking about doors, electric doors.
Uh-huh.
Is that for a cannabis shop? Is
that was
okay,
part of the
I had
business.
a coin shop here in town for 20,
That's right. I recognize
25
you from
years.
That. Yes.
I never was robbed, and I had an electric door. And I didn't have battery backup, by the way.
Okay. Thank you, bud. I will be in touch with you. Thanks for sitting through our meeting and come. Yeah, appreciate that. All right. Requests for future agenda items. Do my fellow council members have any requests? All right. I just would like to beg the council's indulgence. Part of the mayor's prerogative is to be able to issue some proclamations or some special recognition. And before I head on out of here, I have a few people I would like to honor in the next couple of months with your indulgence. I'd like to honor John Sanders at our next council meeting, and that would be on the 25th. And most people don't know what he does for our community and who he is, and he deserves special recognition. It'd be my privilege to do that. And I would also like to honor Jeff and Ron Thompson before I leave. Their business, which represents 3 of their businesses, are 3 of the top 5 sales tax producers for the city of Placerville. And there's a lot of other ways that they've impacted our city, and I'd like to recognize them for that before I go. So, anyway, is that all right with you? Oh, that's all right. All right. City manager and staff reports.
I don't believe we have anything tonight, Mayor.
Right. Well, thank you. Well, gosh, it's 7:30. We're on a little early tonight.
I just hold on.
Okay.
On this upcoming items, there's one on here that everybody in town ought to get really worked up about, and that is the Pacific Street contract.
Absolutely.
Laying some fresh asphalt on that part of Pacific Street.
Can't wait. Yeah,
that'll be great. So anyway, that ought to fill the room.
That is
just
upcoming.
By people going, yeah.
September
right.
25th, as well as the Community Pride Resolution and adoption of the cannabis ordinance. So with that, ordinance. We will see you on September 25th. Thank you for being here tonight. Good night, Placerville.